The camera lights were still burning, but the energy in the room had changed, subtle at first, then sharp, unmistakable. Sylvester Stallone, the man audiences had idolized for decades as an unbreakable force, sat motionless, his jaw tightening as his eyes locked on Jimmy Kimmel. For a second, no one breathed. The audience didn't know whether to laugh, clap, or wait. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and yet no one could look away. The crew behind the cameras froze, hands hovering over controls, unsure if this was part of the show or the beginning of a disaster. The tension crackled in the silence. The red recording light blinked twice. Jimmy tried to fill the gap with a quick grin, a line ready on his tongue, but it didn't land. The usual charm, the rhythm of talk show comfort, suddenly faltered. Stallone leaned forward just slightly, his posture no longer relaxed but defensive, like a fighter realizing the next move wasn't scripted. Every blink, every pause stretched into eternity, and then, without warning, Stallone stood up. The audience gasped as his chair scraped against the glossy floor. The sound echoed across the set, sharp and final, like the end of an act no one expected to end. Jimmy's smile froze in place, half real, half fear. The cameras stayed fixed, capturing every heartbeat of the unfolding silence. The audience whispered, unsure if they were watching history or humiliation. No one clapped. No one laughed. Just the hum of the lights above, cold and unflinching. And in that moment, one question rippled through every living room watching across America. What just happened between Stallone and Kimmel? And why did it explode so fast? Just minutes earlier, the energy on set had been completely different. Light, easy, effortless. The crowd cheered as Jimmy Kimmel strutted across the stage, his trademark grin glowing under the bright lights. It was supposed to be a celebration, a nostalgic reunion for fans of classic cinema. Sylvester Stallone, the man who had defined courage, grit, and resilience for generations, was there to talk about his upcoming film, a project said to reflect his journey from the streets of Philadelphia to the pinnacle of Hollywood. Everything about the night promised warmth, humor, and respect. As the music faded and the conversation began, Stallone's tone was calm and measured. He laughed softly at Jimmy's opening jokes, offered short, polite answers, and even teased a few behind-the-scenes stories from his new project. The audience adored it. Every word he spoke carried the weight of his legacy. But beneath that calm surface, something subtle began to shift. Jimmy, always known for pushing boundaries, started leaning into his playful jabs a little harder than usual. He joked about Stallone's age, his tough guy image, even hinted that maybe his best years were a few decades behind. Stallone smiled at first, but the kind of smile that hides unease. The crew noticed. The laughter from the audience became slightly awkward, shorter, thinner. Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered, "Don't go there, Jimmy." But it was already too late. The tone had changed. The warmth that once filled the studio began to cool. In that fleeting calm before the storm, no one realized what was coming next, that a single careless question would ignite a moment so raw, so real, that it would leave Hollywood stunned and the internet on fire. It happened in an instant, a single line that sliced through the room like glass. Jimmy leaned forward, his grin steady, but his tone too casual, almost teasing. "So, Sylvester, do you ever feel like your glory days are behind you?" The audience chuckled, expecting another punchline. But Stallone didn't laugh. His eyes lifted slowly, locking on Jimmy's face. The warmth that had carried the conversation was gone. You could hear the faint hum of the studio lights, the nervous shuffling of feet in the front row. Even Jimmy seemed to sense the shift, his smile faltering for the briefest second. Stallone didn't speak right away. He just sat there, still unblinking. The silence dragged on, growing heavier with every heartbeat. Jimmy tried to recover, clearing his throat, fumbling for a follow-up joke, but it was too late. The tone had changed, and everyone could feel it. When Stallone finally spoke, his voice was quiet, calm, but laced with steel. "You think because I'm older, I'm done?" No one laughed this time. The crowd froze. It was the kind of silence that made people stare at each other, wondering if they'd just witnessed the moment a line had been crossed. Jimmy shifted in his chair, pretending to smile, pretending to control the moment, but his eyes betrayed him. He hadn't meant for this to happen. Not here, not live. But Stallone's stare didn't waver. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. Let me tell you something, Jimmy. Some people's best days never end. They just stopped getting applause, the audience gasped. The laughter was gone. The game was over, and everyone knew nothing about this interview would ever go back to normal. The room felt charged, like static before a lightning strike. Jimmy Kimmel, usually in full command of every guest, now looked visibly uneasy. He tried to laugh it off, reaching for his cue cards, mumbling something about just teasing. But Stallone wasn't smiling. His eyes stayed locked on Jimmy, steady, piercing, the same look that had intimidated villains on screen for decades. The difference? This wasn't a movie. This was real. You think it's funny? Stallone asked, his voice low but cutting. You mock what people work a lifetime to build and for laughs? The audience shifted nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. A few chuckles broke out, nervous ones, quickly dying as Stallone continued. I fought harder off-screen than any role I ever played. You don't get to joke about that. Jimmy straightened up, his smile vanishing completely. Hey, come on, Sly, it's just talk show banter. You've taken punches tougher than this. He tried to sound playful, but his voice cracked at the edges. Stallone leaned forward, his hands clasped, tone calm but firm, the kind of calm that makes everyone else panic. Yeah, but those punches weren't from someone hiding behind a desk. The crowd gasped. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." The cameras stayed tight on their faces, Jimmy's nervous grin, Stallone's unwavering stare. The control had shifted. For the first time in years, Jimmy wasn't the host. He was the one being interviewed, judged, cornered. And then came the longest silence of the night. Neither man spoke. You could almost hear the air buzzing through the microphones. The energy in the room wasn't entertainment anymore. It was confrontation. Real, raw, and irreversible. And then, it happened. Without a single word, Stallone pushed back his chair. The scraping sound echoed through the studio like a warning bell. The audience gasped, half believing it was a dramatic bit, half realizing it wasn't. Jimmy blinked, frozen in his seat, his cue cards trembling slightly in his hand. The cameras kept rolling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or capture history. Stallone adjusted his jacket, his movements calm but deliberate, every second stretching into eternity. He looked down at Jimmy for one final moment. No anger, no shouting, and just disappointment, sharp and quiet. You don't cross certain lines, Jimmy, he said softly. And with that, he turned and walked off the stage. The sound of his footsteps was deafening. No music played. No applause followed. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching a legend walk away from the glare of the spotlight he'd commanded for decades. Jimmy tried to recover, forcing out a weak laugh. Well, that wasn't in the script, he muttered, voice cracking slightly. A few nervous chuckles broke the tension, but the atmosphere stayed cold, heavy. Backstage, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled, earpieces buzzing with panicked voices. Stay live! Stay calm! Someone shouted. The control room lit up with flashing signals as crew members debated whether to cut the feed. But the damage was done. Millions of viewers had just witnessed something raw, unfiltered, and painfully real. Within minutes, Twitter exploded. Stallone walks out trended worldwide. Clips spread across social media faster than the network could contain them. Some called it disrespect. Others called it power. But one thing was clear. Hollywood hadn't seen a moment this shocking in years, and no one knew what would happen next. By morning, the internet had already turned the moment into legend. Every major entertainment outlet replayed the clip. Stallone standing, Jimmy's frozen expression, the stunned crowd. Within hours, the video racked up millions of views, dissected from every possible angle, frame by frame, breath by breath. Headlines screamed across every platform. Stallone walks off live. Jimmy Kimmel crosses the line. Hollywood divided over late-night meltdown. Fans flooded social media. Some praised Stallone for standing his ground, calling it the most real thing on TV in years. Others defended Kimmel, saying comedy should never be taken that seriously. The debate was everywhere: podcasts, tabloids, and even morning news panels. Every opinion felt louder than the last. But in the middle of that noise, Stallone remained completely silent. No statements, no interviews, just silence, the kind that spoke louder than any response ever could. Behind the scenes, network executives were in crisis mode. Advertisers called for explanations. Kimmel's team scrambled to control the narrative, editing the official broadcast replay, trimming seconds that felt too raw. But it didn't matter. The uncut clip had already escaped into the wild, circulating, trending, living its own life. Hollywood insiders began to whisper that Stallone's walkout wasn't just anger, it was a message. A statement about how far entertainment had gone, about the line between respect and ridicule. Some called it his boldest moment yet. Others said it was career suicide. That night, Jimmy returned to the same stage. The crowd clapped hesitantly, unsure how to feel. He smiled, but it wasn't the same smile. The kind of smile that hides a bruise. And somewhere across town, Stallone sat in quiet peace. No cameras, no audience. Just a man who had finally drawn the line. Days passed, but the echo of that moment refused to fade. Talk shows, newsrooms, and fan pages were still buzzing, yet Stallone remained silent. Then, without warning, he finally broke it. One post, one sentence, no press release, no interview, just a simple caption on Instagram beneath a black and white photo of his younger self. Some things aren't jokes. That was it. No hashtags, no tags, no promotion. The world didn't need more. Those 4 words said everything. The comment section erupted. Fans flooded him with support, calling him a symbol of dignity in a culture built on mockery. Others demanded an apology from Jimmy, who, on his next episode, addressed the moment briefly. He chuckled nervously, saying, "Sometimes in comedy you miss the mark." The audience laughed politely, but the air felt different, thinner, cautious, uncertain. The charm that once defined him had dimmed, replaced by something more fragile. Behind the scenes, the industry took note. Producers whispered about boundaries and authenticity. PR teams began rethinking their strategies. For a brief moment, Hollywood paused to remember that even in a world built on performance, respect still mattered. Weeks later, the clip continued to trend, not as scandal anymore, but as a cultural turning point. Students analyzed it. Journalists revisited it. Fans replayed it, still debating who was right and who was wrong, but for Stallone, the silence was victory enough. He didn't need to explain. He didn't need the applause. Sometimes walking away isn't quitting, it's choosing peace over noise. And as the studio lights dimmed and the laughter faded into memory, one truth remained clear. In a world obsessed with attention, dignity still has its own spotlight. In a world that thrives on applause, sometimes the loudest statement is made in silence. Stallone didn't storm off for drama. He walked away to remind everyone that respect still matters, even under studio lights. Fame fades, headlines vanish, but dignity endures. The moment may be over, but the question remains, how far should entertainment go before it crosses the line? What would you have done in his place? Laughed it off or walked away? Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's power. Comment your take. The world's still watching.